pilot insisted on landing in Sana'a airport together with the permitted aircraft. The leadership of the coalition took the measures. He left from the Sana'a airport, and our air forces had to compel him to land in Jizan airport in less than an hour. And now we are investigating with the pilot and his co-pilots to know why he was there without a permit. That's what we would like to emphasize, so that our leadership and the coalition doesn't have to take unwanted measures, especially that the aircraft are civilian aircraft and they might contain some passengers. So we are asking everyone to commit to the permits given to them either by the air or in sea, so that they are not prone to, God forbid, to be impacted by the operations. We want to emphasize that the permits or the passes are now done in the shortest possible time. I can show you now a slide that shows during the work that happened over the past 24 hours or the past 48 hours, and we have cases now under process. All the requests are now dealt with on the spot, and we give the passes or permits, and then we notify the agencies either in the leadership or in the vessels or ships in the sea by all the operations. I'm not going to mention to you that there are those who receive the permits and do not communicate. So we emphasize one more time with the leadership of the coalition that in order to protect the safety of the passengers and the aircraft and the safety of the procedures, we ask everyone to please commit to our standards. The website is there, communication is requested. You can call us at 24/7, and we are working at any moment to look at any request. We have requests to evacuate a person, to evacuate a group of people. Then we do that either by land, sea or air. But this has to happen in the official channel, so that we avoid what has happened this afternoon. This is regarding the relief, and we wanted to emphasize that, and we continue to kindly ask everyone to coordinate with us. The relief operations are organized, and I mentioned to you yesterday that we have cases of the militias of the Houthis who have intercepted some of the relief and support agencies who, when they wanted to move from the airport to the hospitals. And we understand that this kind of work is trying to give the media and the public opinion that there is restrictions to the support and relief that is happening. However, this is completely not true, and we emphasize that we call on everyone to be committed to what we have announced, and all the channels are open now for all kinds of cooperation and coordination to avoid any unwanted situations for everyone. Regarding the operations, over the past 24 hours, I mentioned to you that this phase now is the selected targets. We want to reach, to drive those militias to be completely frozen and to give them no options to operate. Now, the work is now at parallel lines, and the work is happening by targeting the fixed or stationary groups. The regrouping is not allowed for the militias, and we have done direct coordination with the people's committees in the Zanzibar area. There was a presence of great groups of the Houthis militias and their supporters, and then we had an operation against them yesterday, and I believe it was an operation, a precise and effective, largely effective operation that allowed the committees and the tribal members to advance on the ground. We have been able also to eradicate the forces in Zanzibar, which were a main subsidiary towards their militias in Aden. This is what we did yesterday. The work also continues with regards to the operations in Sa'da and the southern borders of Yemen. I mentioned to you that our intelligence shows that these militias and their supporters are trying to achieve something along the borders. However, that is why we have targeted their groupings and their ammunition stores and their fuel storage. We did not allow them to spread or move around and work in a way to threaten the borders. So we have targeted Baqam al-Bakr and Sa'da in a very focused way. As for the rest of the operations, there are operations now taking place that started in the very late afternoon in Taz in order to support the brigates that returned to the legitimacy against the Houthi militias in Taz. We targeted a number of sites over there, and probably the media has published some of the news about that. The work is sustained, and also the Amran and Sana'a, the regions, the work continues to target the ammunition stores to prevent them from using or moving them. In Al-Bayda had its share of operations today in order to improve the position or the situation for the resistance on the ground. All this happens at the context of targeting the militias of the Houthis, preventing their movement, preventing their impact, preventing them from sustaining their operations. Work continues, thank God, in a gradual and improving way. The air forces have done over 100 sorties. There are selected targets, and the phase now is a very precise work. You can notice that today the media has published some of the shown some of the vehicles that were targeted near Aden. All these operations require a great effort in order to identify, to verify the information with the intelligence, and to compare and contrast that with our sources of information, and then to take action by the in the aircraft in the air in Yemen. The operations are working at a good pace, and I mentioned to you and to the media as well that these militias are now on the defensive, and they have no leadership or control. Their work is desperate. Their operations are more destructive than being purposeful military operations. This continues also in Aden, but at a lesser pace. The resistance is gaining on the ground. As you can know, the fighting inside the populated cities is very difficult. The professional armies, let alone the resistance, the people's resistance that lack the experience. So we communicate daily with them. We target the groups of the militias once they are away from the civilians, or when it is possible to target them in a selective, precise way, without causing any harm to the locations of the citizens or the resistance. We had information yesterday that in the suburbs of Aden, these militias have confiscated some of the fuel and turned them into supply points and a launch point. The operation, I can assure you, is happening in a growing crescendo. The work is taking place, as I mentioned to many media. This kind of work requires patience, perseverance, work, precision in order to achieve our targets. We are not here in trying to hurry up or just speed up to for the sake of speed. We are not here trying to whether we have short time or shortage of resources. We have the time and we have resources, and we are achieving our targets with in a crescendo, and we are not hasting things up, and we are not burning the time. We are continuing our work and phases until we reach the success that we are aiming for on the ground. Of course, some of the targets that we hit yesterday is one of the checkpoints that were built by the militias in Zanzibar on the roads. We have hit these yesterday, and we paved the way for the People's Resistance Committees. I mentioned to you the gas stations. This is one gas station that I mentioned. It has been captured. Then it was turned also into a fuel storage and ammunition storage, so it was very natural to hit it. One of the camps in Sa'da area, and I want to emphasize here on something that I previously hinted at. We have called on the tribal heads and leaders to cooperate and not to shelter or harbor any militias or store any ammunition. The information that we have is that there are a number of tribal leaders who are supporting these militias. They could be for personal gains, or they keep them in their farms, or and they help shelter the Houthis and harbor some of their ammunition. We send them a message: unless they desert those Houthis or kick them away, they will be target. It is not going to be any camouflage that they do in the farms or in the properties of individuals to turn them into leadership points and ammunition stores. This is completely known to us. And what is happening now in Sada is targeting these groups and points that contain these ammunition and fuel. As for the ground operation, the borders of Saudi Arabia have not witnessed any operations other than what has been in the previous secluded, desperate individual operations. So we use the direct fires from individuals. We don't consider that as being influential. The land forces and the border guards have enough resources and experience to deal with that and to secure the borders of Saudi Arabia. There is coordination and synchronization between the operations either on the borders or those by the Air Force by targeting the rear lines in Sada and their suburbs, as the ones that I mentioned to you in our brief. The maritime operations are sustained at the same level, and they are facilitating the sailing of the permitted and vessels. I assure you that some vessels are prevented from reaching to the ports when we suspect their loads or supplies, or when they refuse to cooperate with the surveillance ships. We want to emphasize that we are not going to allow to support the Houthis in any way, not by land, sea or air. That's what I wanted to mention to you today, and now the question and answer session is open to you.
السلام عليكم. معاذ الجديد من قناة
السلام عليكم. معاذ الجديد الإخبارية channel.
سعادة العميد أعلن حرس الحدود
The border guards of Saudi Arabia announced that 120 Houthis were captured. How does that impact the operations, and is this an index to show the different change of direction of the Houthis? First of all, dear brother, let me start where I started. The operations on the borders of Saudi Arabia, we cannot talk about any such operations, and I mentioned that no direct skirmishes happened with the Houthi militias because our tactics are to prevent them from reaching to the borders in any way possible. What the border guards has mentioned is in the context of the security operations that the border guards do by capturing some individuals who are unarmed. The numbers that were mentioned have a number of things. They are of different nationalities coming in from the African Horn, who were in Yemen, and so in the north of Yemen under the operations that are taking place. They have no other way but to infiltrate, so we are capturing them. They are unarmed and defenseless, so these operations or movements of individuals take place in all areas, and Yemen was one of the countries that always come from sources. We take the measures in these cases, which is dealing with those infiltrators, smugglers, and we know that they have been active in these areas, and the border guards has always been taking its measures against them. So they are something, but the armed persons who are from the Houthi militias, then they are prone to the fires of the front lines of the land forces and the border guards, and I assure you what the border guards said is part of the security operations of their routine and daily work.
سعد العميد سعد المطرفي من قناة
سعد المطرفي العربية channel.
سعد العميد أنا أبغى أبدأ من كلام.
I would like to start at the point you mentioned that the militias of the Houthis are on the defensive, and you talked about the position of some of the tribes. I would like to ask you here about the nature of cooperation and coordination with the militias, yes, with the people's committees and the tribes. The nature of coordination, are we talking about leaderships that receive military directives from the coalition, and then they move according to military directions and orders or not. And this is a secondary question. The sympathy of some tribes for either personal or individual gains with the militias of the Houthis. In wars, they usually drop pamphlets or messages that have messages to the people at large. Not using that, is this because you are not convinced about its effectiveness, or are you delaying that for later? As for the tribes, I mentioned that everyone knows the mosaic of the Yemeni people, and the tribe is an essential constituent of the society. We emphasize that we said only some, but not everyone. Most of the tribes of Yemen understand their responsibility, and their support of the legitimacy and security and peace of Yemen is a responsibility for everyone. They do appreciate and shoulder their responsibility, and you've heard yesterday in the briefing of the Yemeni Vice President who assured that Yemen is for everyone, for all its people. When we mention that, we have information, we have confirmed information that there is a small minority of those tribal heads are acting individually, either to achieve personal financial gains or because of their lack of understanding of the situation, which is unaccepted. The communication is by the government of Yemen, and they know exactly who are the leaders of the tribes and know how to reach them. And when the situation becomes negative, then we assure that they are going to be one of the targets, and we are not going to allow the presence of any ammunition or a back front for the militias of the Houthis in any way or shape or form. So we're calling the tribal heads and those in the army and all people in the Yemeni society. It is the time now to embrace the legitimacy and desert the Houthis and their supporters, so that they are not so they don't jeopardize their safety. As for the pamphlets, the psychological warfare is part of the military operations, and it's part of our plan, and when it is time, you're going to see that on the ground. It is going to be a clear message. There are various messages to communicate with all people. They reach to them, they receive our messages, and there are so many honorable and honest people who are doing that. I mentioned previously that the citizens are normal citizens who have not received any military training, even though if they have any experience, it is limited experience, and they are facing a regular rebellious army, and what they're doing is worthy of our respected appreciation, which is going to be a positive work, and you're going to witness that. Farhan al-Farhoud, the Madain organization, and the collapse of the deposed president's forces. To what extent the coalition can focus on developing a strategy in order to attract his forces through certain incentives in coordination with the Yemeni government in order to regroup them in the army? To what extent can the coalition forces focus on developing a strategy in order to attract those who are standing with Ali Saleh to depose him and to embrace legitimacy, especially that you have mentioned previously that the heads of the rebellious brigades are not trying but to maintain their personal gains, and you also emphasized that these brigades do not understand the security of Yemen. I'm going to start with what was mentioned by His Excellency the Yemeni Vice President when he emphasized that the Yemeni army and what is being subjected to in terms of desertions and individual operations has been done by plan, and everyone knows that the post-president has a role in that. So the messages that we're sending through the briefing and the communication that takes place by the Yemeni government with the heads of the brigades and assuring them that the situation now is not as it used to be. They have to understand that, and they have to understand the message that the situation is not going to be as it was before the operation started. So we call them again from this forum and to the communication by the Yemeni government that what is happening right now is absurd. And if they continued to sustain the operations and fight against the Yemeni citizens is completely absurd and nonsensical. So the decisive storm is going to reach them, and they still have the time now to return to legitimacy and to heal the wounds of Yemen in order for Yemen to pass through this bottleneck. And everyone knows that these militias were implementing a foreign agenda for foreign interests that are not in the interest of the Yemeni people. So I say that the situation is now different on the ground.
I'm wondering if you have given any more thought to a 24-hour humanitarian pause that's been called upon from different human rights aid organizations in order to allow Yemenis to get to safer areas.
Again, I will repeat what I'm saying. There is no need to any, let's say, humanitarian pause, because we do not reject any request to go to Yemen unless we ask to coordinate. I show you in the slide a lot of cases. We organize it according to the operation plan. We make sure that each request has a response, a very quick response, to make sure that we satisfy the request. We ask the countries and the NGOs to just be in the adequate time with respecting the timing that we gave, does not show without any permission or any clearance to land in one of the airports, to avoid any misunderstanding or mistakes. But we call that these militias and their allied to implement what the United Nations Resolution 2216, which asks to cease all the violence and all the combat action, and to be confirmed with the international law, and to give up the fight to make sure that we can relieve all the population of Yemen, not only for a certain time. We want that these militias cease their combat to make sure that we can relieve all the population, not only for a certain time. Thank you. شكرا لكم.
Thank you very much, and I wish all the best to everyone.
ديننا وبلادنا وشعبنا